And they have to have strategists in-house or leadership in-house that knows that taking a strong political stance on one side is going to piss at least half of America off.
There's like the answer, and then there's a conspiracy answer. Which one do you want?
Oh, give me... I want the conspiracy, dude. That's what I want.
Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believe me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball.
This is the encore of the return. It's Friday, so you know what time it is. It is time for another episode of the Best Damn Agency podcast, and calling ourselves the best damn anything, not just marketing fodder, Joey. That is what we have set out to be.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening at home, this is your place for unfiltered, unscripted conversation about all things digital agency ownership, life, and of course, agency sales. We are going to keep it 100 with you, and we're going to try to bring the value. So without further ado, let's jump in. What's up, dude?
Oh, just sorting through all these leads.
Swimming in a bathtub of inbound leads. Yeah, it's funny. Being an outbound guy my whole life, I finally felt the exhilaration of inbound clicking and like, like this is what it looks like to get 12 qualified meetings in a day. I'll take it. So what was this is it's an outlier for you.
Yeah.
And
I've driven inbound leads my whole life, but not like in this mass and not this qualified.
All organic, right? All social?
Yeah, it's all through content.
Okay, so let's actually sit on that for a second. So we talked last week about this weird season, pivoting the business, trying to figure out what the new model is moving forward. I think some of that for you is even internal reflection. What do I want? What am I trying to build? And alongside of rebirthing the business, you also, had this desire building to do more content creation. So talk about what that journey's been like a little bit, and then how maybe that has resulted in some of the stuff that you're doing right now that's generating some interest.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting. I think that, did we talk about last week? Like, yeah, we did with Hormozy, but like how he talked about like the magic of media and content, and like same thing, man. Like I think that you can get, lazy is not the right word because outbound is hard, but you can get comfortable in your lane. Right, like I know my lane. My lane is outbound. I know how to do cold calls, cold emails, LinkedIn, direct mail, in-person stuff. Like I can build strategy around that. I can create good messaging around that. I can do all the things that get results.
Yep.
And so every business that I have ever grown has grown off of the back of either outbound or doing good work and then getting referrals. And so I've never really pumped much into content, which the irony in all that is I'm actually an extremely polarizing character that has really good content stored up from years of just doing the things that produce knowledge and wisdom in particular categories. And I'm not afraid because I have excuse the language. When have I ever said that?
Never.
I have no fucks to give, right? Like people, like the amount of comments on like my viral post that went viral on LinkedIn last week or whatever was like, no one's talking like this on LinkedIn. No one says how they really feel. And I'm like, that's exactly right. It's like people they're so stale. And I think my approach to how I'm willing to write and do and film and all the things that we do from a content perspective, I think has just been wasted, for lack of better terms, because I've not done anything proper with it. And so for me, it's like, well, a couple different things. One, if I ever want to sell this business, I need to be diversified. If I'm going to pick one or the other, I'm always going to pick outbound because that's the hardest to crack that nut, and it's far more appealing to a potential buyer.
Yep.
But there is a level of scale that happens when you have leads coming in from the phones, from email, from social, from creating content, from hopefully an ad, some sort of ad and retargeting strategy down the road. If you can crack all those nuts, then you somewhat fortify the existence of your business from a healthy perspective.
How many leads did your one post yesterday drive inbound?
Total or qualified 12 meetings. Total, I think, somewhere around 23.
So 20 plus conversations, more than half of those qualified.
That's crazy, man. Get on the calendar, yeah. Yeah, it's wild. And what's funny is the first thing you and I talked about in the green room before this was just how much easier inbound is to close. So it's like, that's the other thing too, is like if I want to increase my or if I want to decrease my cost per acquisition, like I have to be doing these types of things. Cost per acquisition is fairly predictable from an outbound perspective. It's fairly predictable from an advertising perspective. It's kind of a random number from a content perspective. It really depends on how good your content is, when it hits, who interacts with it. But when it hits, it's a massive CPA, or your CAC goes down drastically. So that's the other thing, is I'm also playing the profitability lever that is content.
Yeah, dude, I love that. I feel like yesterday was kind of a taste of what's to come, even if it is an outlier, right? Like even if you don't have anything else that gets 1 million people to engage with it, or 2,000 comments or whatever, which I would not put it past you to start doing that more regularly. But let's say that you get 1/10 of that, and you get 2 leads per post, and you post 5 times a week. I mean, there's just you could start to see how this could take off.
Well, and an interesting anecdote, I haven't decided if this is like the what drove it, but that one post, it generated like somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 profile views on LinkedIn. And about halfway through that, I had a hunch or an intuition that my messaging wasn't perfect, right? It wasn't great. And so I just kind of like took a gamble midway through when I'm getting all this traffic, and I just changed my headline statement basically. And what's funny is massive jump up in leads, like within an hour.
What does it say now?
Let me see. It says, I'll build your entire outbound sales operation and team better and faster than that $300,000 sales leader you think you need. Give me 6 weeks and I'll transform your outbound forever. Book a call at apexrevenue.com.
Boom.
Yeah. It used to say, we will build, lead, and manage your sales operation and team. Fractional VPs of sales. Blah, blah. It basically just talks about what we are, not what we do for you.
I know a long time ago when you were really invested in LinkedIn, probably 3-4 years ago, before it came to hotness. Yes. At that point, one of the big things you were into is optimizing your about page or your profile page to read almost like a landing page, and you wanted people to convert off of that.
Yes.
It sounds like right now you're pushing people back to the website.
Yeah, well, I got away from LinkedIn. Did a couple things. Obviously Microsoft buys things and they ruin them. But actually, I think Microsoft's done a phenomenal job with Sales Navigator and a lot of things on LinkedIn. So I've been very pleased with the improvements they made. But one thing that changed about the profile, and I think this is because they got smart, was they made the summary / about section less of like the focal point of a profile. So it sits further down. It's more collapsed. It's not as big of a driver. I really think it comes down to headline and then maybe your featured section right below it.
Yep.
Your headline, your header image, your profile image, and then your featured section. So what I've just decided to do, and this is actually, I think this is going to increase a ton because we're going through a website redesign right now and it's going to be badass, is I think that my goal is to get people to the website where it's going to be very difficult not to convert. Just by the way that you saw yesterday.
Yeah, it's sick.
You've
got a mascot. Tease it out right now.
I have a mascot now. I'm pretty excited about it. I want to almost create I was talking to Zach. So Zach Williams is actually doing the design. He's the most talented designer I've ever met. He doesn't do this like as a service. He's an ex-designer turned CEO, built a big agency, and he's a buddy of mine. So he's doing me a solid. And he's so talented, and we were talking about just like having a mascot of some sort. It was his idea originally, and the more I thought about it, I was like, I kind of want to create like the fuck you brand, like sales mascot, similar to like, remember the fucking paperclip in Microsoft Word back in the day?
Oh yeah.
Like I want to create like something like that, where it's like this iconic thing. And it's just kind of like this character that's all over the place, and you're like, what is this? Like, why does he have this thing? Because what we're basically moving our brand back to was I think that we started to get too corporate. This is part of like our old, as we rebranded, I think we just got too corporate for some reason. I have a few reasons why, but I'm not going to talk about it publicly. And I wanted to get back to what makes us unique, what makes me unique is that fuck you brand. Like that, hey, I know our shit. Like we know exactly what we're doing. We know how to do this. We want to do it our way. And if you don't want to work our way, then don't worry about working with us. but I also want to show off but we also don't take ourselves too seriously either. That's kind of the general gist there. And so it's crazy when you communicate that to a really gifted strategic designer like Zach, and he makes it like a real thing. It's kind of cool.
He does his thing, dude. I love that. That's awesome. I'm excited. We need to get like a full size suit design of the mascot cool. that you can then wear and film a bunch of like little YouTube shorts or something for like an Instagram story.
That would actually probably hit pretty well.
I think I'll do it. I mean, I'm probably the better of the two of us at being a mascot.
Could you imagine doing like Jacques style video with that mascot, but like having a bunch of cuss words, like bleeping out, like, "Yo, what's up? I'm the FU cheese" or whatever. You know,
it's amazing.
And this is why your sales suck shit. Just like have them do like a 60-second. I'm actually gonna text Jacques after this. Okay, he will love that.
We talked a lot about content you're creating. It's exciting. How about content that you digest? So, I've invested a lot more time in learning and people that I listen to. Your time is valuable, as is everybody's listening to this. How do you curate and choose who you listen to, who you invest your time with from a content creation perspective?
What creators do I pay attention to?
Yeah, do you have like a filter, even if you haven't like written it out, but it's just something that's more intuitive?
Right now, I'm on a. There's two categories I would say that I consume in. I'd say 3 categories. From a business perspective, I have kind of gotten away from all the new stuff. Like I just feel like a lot of people are just ripping and duplicating, putting their own spin on things, and so there's not a ton of like new books that I care about, but there's a lot of really good, like more heady, makes you think. And so like Nassim Taleb, I've been reading a lot of his books. He's got like Black Swan. He's got Anti-Fragile. He got a lot of really good books. I've read some Stoics. What's his name? Green, 48 Laws of Power, like that whole suite of books. It's really good. So I've been reading a lot more like old guys, that aren't tainted by all the bullshit politics and politically correct, and it's like they just told you how it is, and I appreciate that. So that's like the business side of things. So my filter is basically, have they been successful, like truly successful, or are they just a creator? Okay. Has the content been proven and tested over time to be valuable
versus just something that just got spun up?
Yeah. Like there's a ton of new stuff out nowadays, and I plan on writing a book at some point, and I hope people consume my new content. But I tend to look at like who's proven and who's been around, and business was a lot harder back then than it is now. And so if it's proven back then, then it's sure as hell going to help me now. So it's more about like CEO mindset, philosophy, a lot of that. So that's that category. Yeah, dude. But truly, man, I would say that I spend most of my time consuming entertainment, like creators, from like comedians. We've talked about this before. Like comics are a big piece of my consumption, because I think that they have a very unique spin on the world, and they have like very, I would say, untainted worldviews, in the sense that they are kind of the last frontier of people who can kind of just say what they want to say. And I think that it allows me.
Agree.
Yeah, it actually allows me to see the world through like a less. Doesn't feel like there's much of an agenda when I listen to them speak and talk about the world. So when they talk about events, like most of them land just kind of in the middle somewhere. I'm like, hey, these guys are retarded and these guys are retarded. But as a whole, like they stay in the middle and they can kind of play both sides, which I appreciate, because I tend to play both sides.
I literally drove home. I was hanging out with some guys this morning. We got talking about the exact same thing. We were talking about like the YouTube rabbit holes we'll go down, who we'll listen to, who's thought leadership that we like, and then we started talking about comedians. Same exact reason. Like, well, who's got the most unbiased, unfiltered takes out there? It's comedians. And so we talked a little bit about Chappelle. I drove home listening to Tom Segura and John Mulaney.
Oh, and I love Tom Segura.
Dude, he is hilarious. So who's his buddy? Who's his buddy that he does a podcast with?
Bert.
That does the machine?
Bert Kreischer.
The Machine.
Yeah. The machine.
They made that into a movie. It's a movie now.
I know. Bert Kreischer's a G. Both him and Tom are awesome. The Two Bears, One Cave is their podcast.
Okay, so he was in there talking about how Rogan hit him up and said, "Hey, dude, I want to be your friend." Really fucking hard.
You're making it
he's
really
like,
hard.
I think I've got a problem. I won't hang out with any other men because I
think they're gay.
What did he say? He's like, yeah. He's like, can you have male companionship and not be gay? And he's like,
I think he went to his buddies. He's like, what's wrong with Joe? Like, is he gay? It's really funny.
He also said, and I was worried that they would think I had a problem because at the time I was drinking 9 beers a day. They asked me like, dude, you're probably an alcoholic. How many drinks do you have a day? He's like, 9. And what I didn't tell him is that they were all doubles.
He does have a drinking fetish, I should say.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So my third category is like I listen to Patrick Bet-David a lot. I think he does an amazing job he's probably the best interviewer of like politicians, media moguls, people who have political commentary and or just world commentary. And he's really interesting. He's actually an entrepreneur that I would love to emulate. Like he's like, I have 3 stages in life that I'm going to run through. 20 years in business, which he just sold his insurance company for like $400 million cash in the pocket.
Wow.
20 years in media, like building a media. He's got Valuetainment, which is like their main media umbrella. And then 20 years in education reform, political reform, et cetera. He can't be president because he was born in Iran unless they change the laws. But I respect his immigrant hustle. And I think he's also extremely inquisitive and very thoughtful. So I like listening to how he asks questions and how he strings thoughts together, because I think that's a really powerful gift to possess.
That gives you like 10 more years in business until you need to become a media mogul, and then you can start your political career.
That's right.
All right, let's give the people what they're waiting for. Let's give them some sales nuggets.
I thought it was Budlight.
Before we do that, we could talk about Budlight. It's kind of a sales nugget. We'll make this a soft turn into the sales stuff. All right,
great.
So I actually read this yesterday, which is why I brought it up on the show. Hold, please. All right. Bud Light risks losing its title as top-selling U.S. beer to Modelo after sales plunges 25.7% in biggest weekly decline since the Dylan Mulvaney tie-up. So a 26% dip in sales in a week, and that is just the latest in the trend of the overall brand's decline. So I'm going to ask a pointed question, and I got to figure out exactly what it is. But it feels like a lot of brands are going through this where they really want to push a progressive agenda. They want to appeal to, they want to appeal to that subsection of people. They want to appeal to political activists, the woke left, whatever you want to call it. They're deciding to appeal to a small group at the expense of their entire brand for the rest of humanity that disagrees with at least the extreme take on those different things or support for those different agendas. Why are they doing this? Like, why they have to be smart enough, and they have to have strategists in-house or leadership in-house that knows that taking a strong political stance on one side is going to piss at least half of America off. So why not remain neutral at best, and at worst, like dip your toe in versus going full-fledged supporting of these different things?
There's like the answer, and then there's a conspiracy answer. Which one do you want?
Oh, give me I want the conspiracy, dude. That's what I want. So I can clip this up. Look, I'm gonna make a footnote so I can clip it up. So
it's not even that it's a conspiracy. I think that it's an actual like proven, documented, written agenda of sorts, right? So you notice all these organizations taking extremely woke stances. The irony in that is that a lot of them did not want to originally, and probably some of them still fight it today. So if you look back into like the early, before 2010, so like the 2000s, the main tactic of those times was, and you guys all have probably heard this, Occupy Wall Street. It was essentially the progressive left leanings, even to some degree like the libertarian movement, for where they wanted to take power out of corporate hands, and so their best strategy was divesting. Right, we will essentially occupy Wall Street by taking capital from these big corporations to help them make decisions and have them bow to our will. It's a good strategy, taking money from them. Well, after the Republicans made the unfortunate decision to bail out the big banks in 08, 09, 2010, the left got more aggressive with the like, oh, okay, you want to play that game, right? Which they should never have bailed out those banks. The right is just as screwed up as the left. Let's just be honest. But the left said, okay, let's take a different strategy. And so they took the strategy of the opposite. Instead of divesting, it's, well, let's control through overinvesting. Let's take largest sharehold. And so you have, this is BlackRock, this is the Vanguards. These are these guys who have trillions of dollars of assets under management. Mm-hmm. And you have these lobbyists who are promoting these large diversity, equity, inclusion. The CEI is like the corporate equity index. You've got ESG, which is environmental, socialist, and governance. You've got all these different, if it's got 3 letters, it probably sucks, let's be honest. But you've got all these things, and they all sound great. Oh, like, let's have diversity and equity and inclusion. Like, you don't even know what that means, right? And so there's quotas now, and there's now indexes and benchmarks and scores that these corporations have to have that give them benefits and breaks. But it's also pushed by the people who own majority large shareholder. So here's where conspiracy comes in, if you can call it that. Is you have the BlackRocks of the world. So between BlackRock and Vanguard, I believe they have $14 trillion under management.
Boom. That's a lot.
And so they can do and buy and whatever. They could literally buy all of Apple right now and still have like $13 trillion left over. Just buy the entire company, which, anyways. So you've got people like BlackRock who have extremely high controlling interests in these companies. And these companies don't necessarily want to take this woke agenda, but they're being forced by the BlackRocks of the world. One thing you have to realize is BlackRock is not a U.S. company. It is a global company, right? They have interests in all foreign governments and all foreign corporations. And this is them tipping their hand at their strategy. I believe this is an entire strategy for ultimately controlling and destroying the West by moving us from capitalist to socialist. That's really it. Socialist leads to communist, right?
Yeah.
Get controlling interest in a few larger corporations at the top that make all the money, and everybody else under there is spread out equally, in air quotes. Only people making money at the very top.
Yep.
And so, to some degree, it's a strategy of making the West pay for the sins of their past, right? And so, here's an example. ESG is that environmental, social, and governance thing, right? Well, these companies get scores based on how environmentally friendly they are, how diverse and equity and inclusion they have, and governance is more just like what governance is. And so, an example, BlackRock is one of the largest, if not the largest investor in Exxon. Exxon is our largest petroleum, oil, and gas company in the United States. Okay? Exxon has their U.S. plants. They also have their international plants. They have a large foothold in like the Southeast Asia and China, right? They have all these big plants where they're collecting oil from, et cetera. Also in the Middle East. So, and I'll end this story here shortly. BlackRock, who is the largest controlling, basically put pressure on Exxon to evacuate and have a mass exodus of these international plants where they were getting oil at a steal of a deal. And they said, hey, too much carbon emission or whatever the issue is that they plot under environmental. Well, if BlackRock owns them and they say they go away, then you would think that, well, we need to decommission these and no longer hurt the environment, blah, 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 blah. We're doing the world a favor, right, because climate change. Well, naturally, those things didn't get decommissioned, and all those plants got bought up by PetroChina. PetroChina is the Exxon of China. It is run by the Communist Chinese Party, or it has large ties to it. Who's the largest investor in PetroChina?
BlackRock.
BlackRock.
Damn.
So BlackRock doesn't actually give a shit about the environment. They give a shit about control, power, and money.
Dude, that's crazy.
It is. And so they're making their dollar because they have a larger share of PetroChina, and PetroChina, because it's a more localized, it's more profitable for them. They push out the Exxons through ESG, and have them push this woke agenda to get out of these plants to then have those plants occupied by companies they also own. But here's the thing.
Almost like people just suck regardless of what agenda they're pushing.
Correct. So all these powers don't actually care. They care about power. That's it.
Yeah.
It comes down to they don't sit left or right politically. They utilize left and right against each other to create division. And when there's division, there is weakness. And when there's weakness, there's opportunity for those who have the means to create power. Listen to that again.
Good,
and if you don't believe me, go listen to Vivek Ramaswamy, a very, very intelligent Indian American who's running for the GOP candidacy right now against Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. And listen to him talk about ESG. He's not just familiar with it, but he's in that space of hedge funds and that kind of stuff. So it's not a conspiracy. It just is what it is.
It's so funny. Andy Fricella, he's always like, it's conspiracy until it isn't. And some of his takes are pretty hot. but
he calls it Andy Damas. He calls it Andy Damas, Nostradamus, who predicted a lot of the future events. He calls himself Andy Damas because dude, it's so funny. Like a lot of the things that he says seem quacky, like eventually become true. It's kind of like Alex Jones.
And 5 years later, they were proven right. All right, hey, we're gonna make the turn into sales here. I will make the pitch short because we did a long ESG story that I hope you appreciated. Somebody out there, quick pitch. We not only run this podcast, but we also run the best damn agency mastermind, the most elite community for 7- and 8-figure agency CEOs. If you're dead set on growing, if you want to be in community with other badass agency owners, if you believe that if you give to a collective, you are going to receive back tenfold what you put in, you might be the right kind of person to be a part of this community. So we're going to have a really badass retreat. We do them twice a year. They're members only, but we're doing something a little bit different. Our one in November, we're going to Palm Springs, and we've got 7 spots for guests. It is an opportunity to get in with the community, get a lot of value from the community, contribute to the community, and figure out whether or not this is a long-term option for you. If you want to check that out, go to bestdamnmastermind.com/retreats, because I'm going to make that right after this show. bestdamnmastermind.com/retreats, and you can check out some more information on Palm Springs. Apply. You might be the right kind of fit. We'll have a conversation and figure out if you can join us. So check that out. All right. Boom. Joey, you have pivoted to, I think you're still leveraging this language, like a fractional VP of sales model with the company.
Sure.
So we're bolting on to $3 to $30 million digital marketing agencies, and we are running sales leadership, sales strategy, sales management alongside of their leadership team.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did I say all that relatively correct?
You did a good job. Good enough.
Okay, cool.
For the people at home.
Yeah, so my thought with this is, we have an opportunity now from this purview, or you have an opportunity now to either evaluate VPs of sales on a regular basis who are already embedded at these companies, right? Or to step in and have one of our fractional VPs take that role. And so you have maybe the best seat of anybody that I know right now to say what it is that makes up a potent, effective, right fit person for a VP of sales role. Yep. So when it comes to sales leadership or running a sales department, what are the most important qualities that make somebody successful in that role? What should we look out for?
Yeah. I think the first thing is like knowing what makes for a successful sales operation before you know like who's the better driver for it. Okay. So kind of by level of importance, it goes your messaging. So a lot of people get messaging wrong. Your strategy. So what channels are viable? What angle are we going to take? Are we high volume? Are we low volume? Are we high personalization? Are we scale? Is it more spam, your TAM, whatever? Your messaging, your strategy, your process. So then once you have your messaging and your strategy, then what is the process in which you're going to bring that to market? Your hiring, then your management and leadership, and then your tech. In that order is of level of importance. And so...
Wait, before you... Well, so as a VP of sales, do you need to be able to speak to and architect all of those things?
You need to be able
that fall under?
Yes and no. I mean, if it doesn't already exist, then sure, someone's got to create that, and that's one of our benefits. If it does already exist and you are more or less just hiring and leading the charge and keeping people accountable, and maybe evaluating tech and stuff like that. Like there's difference, but most people listening to this, like you've likely not got a very well-oiled sales operation, right? If you're under 30 million, your sales operation's probably not that sound, just comparatively, right? So, I would say as a whole, you need to be, at the very least, even if you don't architect and create the infrastructure for all of it, you need to be well educated on all of it. So you need to be able to understand messaging, message market fit. If the messaging starts falling off, why? How do we change it? How do we evaluate it? If the strategy is diminishing in terms of its value, right? Some strategies work for 3 months, some work for 3 years, but eventually strategies must change, and because buyers change and markets change and pricing changes. When it comes to the actual process, you need to identify how do we best and most streamlined way get repeatable outcomes for the organization. You need to know how to hire, onboard, train sales reps. You need to be able to lead, keep them accountable, and then finally you need to understand tech and how it ties everything together. But the main qualities of a good sales leader, as you evaluate them, are they need to be able, we've talked about this before, lead, manage, train. They need to be able to lead, so keep the North Star, keep everyone excited and motivated, keep everybody envisioned for what the North Star is. We can't get off track. 1 degree off for too long, we're not going to hit our North Star. You need to be able to coach or train, which is I need to be able to sit down next to you and actually sharpen the tools and add more tools to my sales team's tool belt or whatever it might be. And you need to be able to manage, which is keep people accountable to the metrics that matter. Measure the metrics that matter. Keep people accountable to the metrics that matter. And through that, utilizing that to make decisions, important decisions for the sales organization.
Are there things, as you evaluate people that are currently sitting in that seat at companies that you're coming in to, scope out work and to potentially work with, are there red flags that you look at and you're immediately cued into this person is not the right person, this person's not a fit?
Yeah, well, it depends on like an enterprise VP coming down to SMB is probably not going to be successful, right? They have the challenge with them is that oftentimes they have an infinite budget, seemingly. And I know this.
They don't know how to be scrappy.
They don't know how to be scrappy. They don't know how to pivot, on the fly. It's really challenging. And they don't have like corporate trainings and stuff available to them. They've got to create that. And so I tend to, like, if I'm looking for a really solid VP, I'm looking for more of that scrappy character who understands outbound and also understands outbound from a perspective of there is no cookie cutter, this works versus this. We have to figure out what's going to work best for this use case. So I would like to have seen them be successful in outbound in multiple different scenarios, more than likely. They also need to be people-oriented, meaning they need to not just sit behind a keyboard and a dashboard and that's how they manage their reps. They need to be able to actually get in the trenches and lead those reps. They need to uncover problems that maybe aren't obvious. They need to be able to train to those problems to solve for them. And they need to be able to know which metrics matter. And so, surprise, surprise, there's not that many metrics that matter compared to what a lot of these people are measuring these days.
Tell me the metrics that matter.
There's the obvious macro, right? It's leads in. So there's left of deal and right of deal metrics. The left of deal metrics are like, okay, dials, bad data. So like right now, I'm doing some consulting for an agency that's doing like 12 million in revenue, and they have a decent sized sales org, and they're having a hard time with outbound. When I looked under the hood and I looked at all their metrics, their dial to connect ratio was only like 2%, meaning they're having 2 conversations for every 100 calls they make. Like that's highly inefficient, highly, highly, highly inefficient. Their conversion on those dials are only like 6%. So what that means is they essentially need to have anywhere from 10 to 15 conversations to get one booked call. Well, that means they need to be having I don't even know how many dials that is to actually get a conversion, right?
It's like 800 or 900.
Yeah, it's highly inefficient.
calls.
So there's that. But the other part of it is they have a bad data rating of 33%, meaning that their phone numbers are wrong 1 out of 3 times. So when they pick up the phone to call someone, it's either the wrong number or it's bad number, or it's a no longer existing number. And so their data source is not good. So like those are numbers that matter. Okay, what is my dials? What's my bounce or my bad data rate? What's my connection rate when I do call them? And then what's my booked call ratio? Same thing with email. Opens, bounces, so sends, opens, responses, booked call conversions, bounce rate. What are those metrics? Know that. These are all left of deal. And then when they book the call, it's, okay, what channels did they book from? So understanding like what channels are most viable right now. And then what's their show rate? Are people showing up to those meetings? If they are not, then that's an easy lever we can pull on. And then you got write a deal, which is, okay, again, show rate is kind of the first step into that. But it's deal velocity. How long does a deal take to close? Win rate. How often are we going to win deals? Which pipeline stage, like what are the conversions from stage to stage in pipeline? So from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. Because if it goes, stage 1 to stage 2, 50%, stage 2 to stage 3, 50%, stage 3 to 4, whatever is 6%, well, then there's my bottleneck. That's where deals are getting lost or hung up. So let's fix that area. Those are like the main things. Average deal size, pipeline value, stuff like that. But people are looking at like the most obscure. I mean, this is why I freaking hate like Gong.io. Like Gong is like a conversational intelligence tool that touts all these statistics. And it's like, they put out these bullshit reports about like, well, we've noticed that if sales reps cuss on a sales call, they have a 23% lift on, like, dude, go shove a stick straight up the asshole. Sorry, that was very graphic. Like, so you want me to teach my reps to cuss more because that statistically, no. Like, the hard thing about measuring all these things is there's a lot of factors outside of our control that don't matter. Or not that don't matter, that we don't have control over. Like, I was talking to someone yesterday about this, and there's the macro metrics that matter. And then there are things that are outside of our control. Like, I don't know, what time are we having a conversation? What call did you have before this? Did it wear you out? Was it enjoyable? You have a call with your CFO? You depressed? What call do you have after this? Who are you thinking about? What, you got a hard conversation coming up today? How's your kids doing? How's your marriage doing? Like, did you work out today? Did you not? Did you eat healthy today? Did you not? Do you have friends? You lonely? You depressed? Anxiety? Like, those are things I have no control over that will affect your sales process that you can't do anything about. And so I talk more about like, know the metrics that matter, right? What are the macro levers that we can pull on? And then it's more important to then teach intuition and discernment than it is to teach the next tactic on how I can slide in a fuck you inside of my sales pitch so that my conversions go up. It's like, you guys are measuring the stupidest stuff. Anyways.
We get obsessed with things that are arbitrary. Speaking of, let's talk AI in sales.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I think it's all the hotness, right? People want to talk about AI and everything. And I think what we've figured out, I hope, is like, okay, there's big change possible. There's bigger change on the horizon. There's a lot of potential future impact. And like you can leverage AI to speed things up, but it's not like fully replacing. You don't have AI making your calls for you, right? So we're not like to a point where it's completely replacing the sales. You can.
So I think Smith.ai does that now. I don't think it's very good. And now Air.ai does that too.
I kind of want to do it.
Yeah, I'm interested in it too, just to like. I'm down to test things, but I tend to usually think that things don't work out.
Yeah. So as somebody you have this like wide array. I feel like you right now with the content you're creating, you are definitely a thought leader in the SMB sales space. You're in the trenches with product development teams for different software platforms. They're coming out asking you questions about how they can develop better and what features they can add. Like you're in the trenches with some of these thought leaders. Where do you see AI being helpful in sales? Where do you see it being applied well? Are you using it at all?
Yeah.
What should people be looking
for? Like I think that this is my answer is literally identical to how I have felt about automation. Right? I think automation is wonderful for back of house. I think that it is fairly ineffective front of house. And that's being proven yet again. Joey Damas over here. Like, automation is what has killed a lot of sales production these days. Right? These sequencing tools and cadencing tools and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's automation, but with automation comes commoditization. With commoditization comes a race to the bottom. AI will somewhat do the same, I think. It might be a little bit different, but I think as a whole, back of house is things that don't touch your market, like direct facing. I'm not touching clients or prospects with what AI is doing necessarily, but it is consolidating, streamlining, or automating things on the back end that can make me more effective and more profitable, right? So an example would be Apollo.io just rolled out their conversational intelligence, which is similar to like Gong, right? So this is like a decent feature. They'll pull in your Zoom recording, they will transcribe it, and then they will use AI to auto summarize it for you, and then they will try to actually assign, like tell you, hey, here's what people are committing to based on what this call told you, right? It gets you 80% the way there. It doesn't require an assistant to be on the call necessarily. Like that's how we really run our business, is having assistants on the calls. To take notes. And it doesn't require the sales rep to have to remember nearly as much. It kind of does it for them in live time, which is great. So that's a back of house process. Another back of house is research to some degree, right? Can you give it keywords and it goes, spider the internet to go find and scrape resources that help you do research on your prospects? Yes. Front of house would be, it writes my email for me. It makes the phone call for me. Right? Like those are things that I just don't think, even like content development, like going on the inbound side, is like the post that I put out on LinkedIn that went viral, AI would never write that. Can't, won't. It could probably study me, every post I've ever made, and still not be as good as me, because there's that thing inside of me that just has this intuition that AI cannot predict.
It's the same thing with email. I mean, we've leveraged a platform that introduced a new AI tool that will script your email campaigns for you. And we had it, we wrote in some really good prompts. We gave it some really good ICP information, and they sucked. Yeah.
and listen, they will get better. And there are like some people just suck ass at copy, and it will get them better, but they will still be subpar salespeople. So that's what people don't understand is, yes, it will make the sucky mediocre. They're not going to make the mediocre great, and they're not going to replace the great. It's just not going to happen. And I don't think I'm an old fogey who isn't willing to change. I'm very willing to change. I just believe in my gut that you can't replace that intuition and discernment. And like for instance, if I research someone and I find out that they collect fly rods and Rolexes, and I have a Rolex at home, like AI will never know to put those two together for me to say, hey, I have a Batman, and I introduce that into my sales copy, right? It might say, hey, I saw that you collect Rolexes, and that's super cool, but it won't be able to like piece the like thing that actually unifies us in that one statement ever.
Yep.
Because it doesn't know what I have in my home, right?
Yeah, I mean, I hope not. Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. I don't know. That's probably true.
Dude, it strikes me there's some similarities between AI and VAs.
Okay, yeah.
So, or even sales automation and VAs. So it's like, what are these repeatable processes that are never client or prospect facing that we can leverage somebody else or something else to do
I've done
better,
it.
faster, cheaper?
I mean, I built a small micro AI tool. I'm actually, this is something that's been part of our, like, as I've taken over the reins, something I've really done is like building an in-house software that our VPs run on that help them basically manage all their client sales reps and strategy. Part of that is I get a lot of data from sales reps every single day. It's just a data dump of every sales rep at every organization that we work with. and it goes into this tool. Well, there's a lot of things that I can have AI analyze on that and spit out important things like, hey, based on what's coming in, we should be focusing on these 3 trainings because this seems to be a deficiency across the board. Cool. That's helpful. That takes a lot of time off my VP's plate, and they can spend time actually doing the training. The second thing is, so I built a AI job description creator. So one thing that we do is we help build out hiring systems for clients, because at the end of the day, we know how to hire sales reps. It's something we've done for a long time. And so everything from the hiring process to the copy and the emails to everything else, like we will build that. But a big piece of that is optimizing your job description to perform well, just like in search engine optimization, perform well on Indeed and LinkedIn. Well, we've done so many of them that I basically just trained an AI to, so long as we give it 10 pieces of information that we need to get from a client, which we just gather from intake, I put it into this thing, it runs it through what I've trained it on, and I press one button and it spits out a job description that's optimized for that client. And it is based off of the framework of how we write it.
I've seen a few of them, and they look really damn good. And I'm sure just like anybody that's leveraging AI to do some of the pre-drafts of copywriting, you have somebody with a strategic eye or lens look through it, make sure that it's all up to par. Yeah. But dude, what it spits out looks really. It's
very good. If you train it well, it is like those are things where AI will certainly make you more profitable and optimize what you are currently doing. And so I am looking for those things. I just don't have a whole lot of belief that it's going to be able to replace a really great salesperson in a lot of what they do.
That's insightful, and I hope there's probably a lot of different camps of people listening to this, and there's some who are expecting or hopeful that AI can replace a lot of the labor that goes into their sales operation. And I think what we're saying is like it probably never will fully, and we're definitely not there yet. So
yeah, it'll do a lot more than we think. Like I'm sure it gets way smarter in time. Again, we're
exponentially.
Yeah, we probably thought that Zapier just getting one tool to talk to the next tool and like send data from one tool to the next tool was like amazing back in the day. And then now it's like, no, like you can do all this conditional logic where like what you do on this tool can completely change the infrastructure of this tool over here. Like, yeah, that will happen with AI, and that's going to happen probably quicker than we think. But there's intangibles that you can't train a machine to do. Prove me wrong.
Cool. I love it.
Trust me, it'll make my job a lot fucking easier.
Yeah. Joey runs a company with 0 employees and AI.
Exactly.
AI fractional VPs of sales. AI VPs
there
of
we
sales.
Go.
All right, let's wrap with these 2 things. One,
cool.
We had, I think we can drop his name on the podcast. Super cool dude, Scott Scully, Abstract Marketing. We've been on podcast together. He came in and ran a training for the mastermind a few months ago. Basically, like the things he's learned over the last 20 years building what's soon to be $1 million a year in revenue marketing agency.
$1 million?
That is bootstrapped.
You mean $100 million?
Oh yeah, that's right. $100 million digital agency. As somebody who has aggressive growth goals yourself, you look at somebody like Scott, you listen to what he's built. What were some of your personal key takeaways from the time that he spent with our group?
Yeah, I thought it was super good. I think one thing that was the most thing that stood out to me the most was the amount of money that he's willing to spend to acquire a customer, because it comes down to knowing your numbers, right? For him, he knows his macro numbers that are super important. So that's the first thing is he's willing to spend an astronomical amount of money because he knows his retention, he knows his LTV for his customers, so he has a CAC, cost to acquire a customer, that he feels very good about. And so when I saw the number that he spends a month, which I won't share that, but I was like, holy shit balls. Like that's a ton of money. But then when you look at the numbers outside of that, like he's doing substantial revenue on the back end of that, and it makes sense profitability wise. The second was his attention to, it's very common for an entrepreneur or executive team to like really pay attention to like our time. We view our time as valuable assets, how we spend our time. We try to block our time with certain things, and they have that down to like the janitor, right? Like
it's crazy.
They tell every employee what their ideal week should look like. They don't have the employee tell you what they're like. They know their numbers so well. They know their employees so well. They know what employees are supposed to be doing so well. and what leads to success, that they tell you this is what you need to be doing at this time on this day. That might come across micromanagement wise, but the dude's got 700 employees and is going to do $100 million. So, and it's a fun culture that he's created. So on the other end of that, it's like, yeah, we do have a level of standard that we hold people to, but we also have fun. And I think that's why they've done really well. So those are my two biggest things. But I'd say he shared like 15, and they were all, every single one I was just like, damn. It's all good.
I think it was one of the better trainings that we had somebody come in from the outside and do for the mastermind. If you want to check it out, you can find it. So if you go back to the website, bestdaymastermind.com, top right, you'll see the free masterclass. Check that out.
Oh, that's right.
All you have to give us is an email. So cool. Man, so wrapping up, you and I are both flying solo this weekend.
We are.
We're fantastic husbands, and we sent our wives on a trip. Really, my wife's just amazing, and she totally deserves this. I'm sure you'd say the same thing.
Yeah, my wife's also
What is
pregnant,
life like for you when you're a solo dad?
Dude, I'm a gangster dad, so it's pretty great. My pool should be filled up by Friday or Saturday.
Which is hilarious, because you started filling it like...
Oh, dude, this is what happens when you live on a ranch is you have well water. And so you have to fill at 4 to 5 gallons a minute instead of 8 to 10. So it takes twice as long to fill your damn pool. I have a saltwater pool, but I can't use the salt because the water's not high enough to hit the filter or to hit the skimmers, which then process the water. So I'm like having drop chlorine in there every day. And I found a dead turtle in there yesterday. It was sad. I'm pretty, it's easy, man. I don't envy you who has 3 girls that you have to wrangle because that's 3 bodies and humans. But with Gabriel, man, we're going to have a ton of fun. He and I are, we're best friends. So it's pretty great. I'm going to take him all over town.
Dude,
it'd be fun.
I met a guy yesterday. I'm trying to remember who this even was. He lives on 1 acre, which I know, you might scoff at, but he lives on an acre.
My last house
he just
was
bought
1 acre.
He bought a riding mower, which I know you had at the old house. And he's teaching his 12 and 9-year-olds how to drive the riding mower, and he sets up cones and lets them run races through the yard on the
That's
mower.
awesome. I have 2 riding mowers now. I mean, I have a crew that cuts it. Bro, the other day I felt like such a little rich white kid. So I had my farm hand, which is funny to even say that, who was bush hogging my whole property. I had my private chef who was cooking our meals inside. I had a Hispanic crew who was manicuring my lawn around my house. And I was sitting up on the hill in my Adirondack chair drinking bourbon and reading a book. I was like,
I don't know whether to judge you or tell you that you made it.
I was either like, man, I've either made it or I don't know what's happened to me, but I didn't mind it because I hate doing all that stuff. So yeah, it was an eye-opening moment.
It's funny though, we all do it, right? So if you've ever been to McDonald's and bought a cheeseburger,
totally,
everybody's paid somebody for the convenience of them making your meal. And
yes.
So it's just funny. It's I'm sure somebody would look at that and be like, wow, you're super
privileged,
entitled, or privileged, or whatever. It's no, dude, if you've ever had somebody make a cheeseburger,
must be nice
you've
to
done
be
the
you.
exact same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, little do they know that you spend 6 figures manicuring your farm every year.
And that requires me to work to get all that money. So, but it was just a funny moment where I was like, oh, shit. I don't want to be that guy. I never have been. Our house is big, but it's nice, but it's not, you've seen it. It's not gaudy by any means. That was one thing my wife always said was even though we have the money to go build some beautiful mansion style home, it's we never want to have a house where people feel intimidated to come to. Right. I've been those places when I was younger and super dirt poor, and it was cool to go there, but they felt intangible. So we've always had that posture, and we'll probably keep that posture. But there was that moment where I was like, am I losing the posture up here?
Does it count when you build your giant barn extension with your private workout center and podcast studio?
Let's not talk about that. I just bought a new sauna and a cold tub in the same day.
It's all right, man. You know what? you've had success, so congrats.
I've also
Congrats
had
on your
failure,
success.
so got to walk through them both.
That's it. So do those listening at home, whether you are in the middle of a season of abundance and success or a season of hardship and failure, man, I think that all of that stuff can be a net positive. It just depends on the lens through which you're viewing it, and you can take those setbacks and leverage them for greater success in the future, which I feel like you've done a really good job of, Joey. So thank you, as always, for giving us your time, your attention. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, rate, review, subscribe to the show. Check us out on YouTube. The video's more fun. Give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a subscribe. We appreciate it. And we appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you here next Friday for our next episode of the Best Damn Agency podcast. I'm about to go check out what my kids are doing and prepare for a long weekend. When I walked up last, my 4-year-old had blue hair, and I don't know when that happened. So I don't even know what I'm walking into.
Half the liberals in the world. Okay, bye.
All right.
Whoa! Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believe me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah.